all. My name is Jade Conikrama, and I'm currently doing my bachelor's in exercise, sports, and leisure. This is my second to last year. Today's topic for the webinar is a common issue within society. It's something we all face in our everyday lives, and it's something that I think should be discussed in length because it's something that we face every day, and it's conflict. First, what is conflict? There's a common misconception with conflict that most people think it has to have a physical altercation or involve some sort of physical dispute, whereas conflict in its entirety is a struggle and a clash of interest, attitude, opinion, needs, and even principles. So basically what we're trying to say is conflict is between groups, people, whoever, have a clash or a struggle with how they view certain things or their attitudes on certain things. Conflict comes when those parties are unable to find a middle ground, and thus conflict arises. So basically, if I'm talking to you and we don't have the same view on the way Sprite branded its new bottle, we are unable to find a common ground. The conflict arises from that. Conflict can be between two people, groups of people, and even countries. We all know how different countries have different conflicts. At the moment, obviously, Ukraine are having their issues with Russia. There's a big conflict. Then we've got types of conflict. When we talk about people, we typically are dealing with 4 types of conflict. Firstly, you'll see we deal with intrapersonal conflict. Now, this is a conflict that we deal with as ourselves. So this is a singular individual conflict. This is when we have conflict because of our goals and values start to diverge from what we originally set it out. We start having a battle within ourselves. So an example of this is if a lawyer takes a case and they know the defendant is guilty. The conflict of the values starts within himself. So he has that conflict within himself saying, this guy is obviously guilty, but I have to defend him that he wasn't guilty. So that fight within yourself, that's the interpersonal conflict. Then we get interpersonal conflict. Interpersonal conflict, this is a conflict that arises between 2 or more people that are required to interact with each other every day. So this could be in a workplace, could be anywhere. And they have a difference in their attitude, the goals, values, or even working styles. So if you're in your workplace and you have a disagreement with one of the other employees, that is your interpersonal conflicts. Then we go into intra-group conflict. Same as if we look at, as you can see, intrapersonal means inside. So we talk about within a company, within a business, within a certain type of group. Is what we're talking about here. So this type of conflict occurs within a group or a team. So we've created a team at our workplace. Now there's a conflict between members because we've possibly disputed on like various ideas, various issues, how we need to solve them. We're having a dispute on that. So that's intra-group. And then we have intergroup. So this is conflict that involves groups outside an organization that disagrees on various issues. Conflict between two groups now in an organization is also intergroup. So intra-group means the group that inside of that group. Intergroup means the group itself is facing off against another group. Basically, that's what it's trying to say. So these 4 types of conflict are how we deal with people. There's obviously other types of conflict, like people versus nature, but this is the main ones that we deal with in society, and it's people versus people, or in ourselves, interpersonal conflict. Okay, now we look at our causes of conflict. But one thing just to even look back on, if you look at our types of conflict, we're just going to remember that these types of conflict can be horizontal, which means you have conflict with somebody on the same level as you, like your peer level as you, and then it can be vertical, which is conflict with somebody that is at a higher level, so like management, or somebody's lower than you, a subordinate. Okay, then we look at how now we've got causes of conflict. So we look at misunderstanding is one of the biggest ones that we have every day. Misunderstanding causes major conflict within people because this happens when people don't understand their tasks, roles, and responsibilities that are given to them. So that's how it creates disagreements. When we don't understand what we're meant to do, our emotions start getting high, and that's how we create conflict with other people. Then personal differences. This is a fundamental cause of interpersonal, so with other people, personal differences. This is one of the big causes. Differences between individuals can occur because of cultural background, family background, traditions, different types of traditions, values, and even education. So these can create differences between people. So ultimately, their personality clashes. That creates the conflict, and it creates more emotions than anything because of these differences, and thus the conflict arises. Then we've got information deficiency, which is basically lack of information. So this comes from like a breakdown of communication. Somebody has not communicated, and ultimately creates distrust and conflict amongst people because there was no communication in the first place. There's misunderstanding, which means that the information was given, but it's just not the correct information. Then there's lack of information, which is no information at all. Right. Then we look at the fifth one was threat to status. Now, this is very important, especially in a country like South Africa with our politicians. If there is a threat to somebody's rank, so the title that they hold within society, people can create conflict this way if there's a threat upon them. So if I am the Minister of Finance and the person lower than me threatens the existence of myself holding this position, there will be a conflict between us, or it will arise because I'm feeling like this person is going to take my position. Then we look at lack of trust. This, again, in the country that we live in, is something that's very big because we have lack of trust with everything. Lack of trust, there needs to be a mutual trust among anyone that is required to work together. Because when we do activities, there needs to be mutual cooperation and support to perform these activities and get to a common goal. So this lack of trust, if we have a lack of trust doing an activity, there will be conflict because emotions will rise because I don't trust you to do that task, to finish that task. So that will create conflict as itself. Then we look at resource scarcity. So now when we talk about resource scarcity, we talk about maybe, like example would be petrol. Petrol is now becoming, because of the Ukraine issue, we are now facing a petrol scarce. So now there's limited petrol. People are going to want to fight for the right to sell petrol. And this will create conflict because people are fighting for this resource that is so scarce. There are so many more issues that can create conflict other than these 7, but these are some of the main ones that we see every day in life. Then we look at positives and negatives with conflict. Everyone thinks, oh, conflict, always negative. There's no positives in it. So we look at the positives first. Conflict can be positive when it causes people to consider new ideas and new alternatives. If a little fight gets you to think out of the box, then it's a good thing. It can be positive when it leads to increased participation, so more people participating in this goal to reach this goal, and increased commitment to decisions and goals of the group. So basically, when we have more people getting to this common goal, it creates a better outcome. It can also be positive when it results in an issue, clarification, or reassessment. So the problem solved becomes clearer, or there's a reassessment of the problem and we can make it better through another direction. It also can be positive when it aids in building cohesiveness and people learning more about each other. So conflict can be positive when we are building trust within each other, we are building friendships with each other, and we're learning more about each other, so how we can further navigate conflict down the line because we now understand each other. So then the negative side of it. So now after positives, we look at the negatives. Conflict does come with negatives. It can be destructive when it leads to harassment, discrimination, or bullying. So when conflict leads to me saying mean names or calling you out because of your color of your skin, stuff like that, that's when it's destructive. When it moves the focus of the important tasks at hand. So when the conflict diverges the whole group or the people from what we need to do, that's when it also is destructive because we're not reaching our common goal. It can be destructive again when it causes the group's cooperation to be reduced. So if we're working on a task, it is reduced because of this conflict. So now we're not focusing on the task, but we're focusing on the conflict. Conflict is also destructive when it tears down the morale of the group or of people, and it reinforces poor self-image. When conflict tears down a person at a human level and gets them to think negatively about themselves, that's when it becomes destructive. And that's not what we're looking for. Right. Then we look at tips and tools to resolve conflict. So this can be, so any of these negative outcomes, how can we now resolve how we deal with issues? Firstly, but it has to be in a constructive manner. That's the important issue. Conflict can be resolved in a constructive manner. Firstly, stay calm. The thing that leads to conflict is escalation. This is where people stop listening to understand. When remaining calm, a conflict, it allows people to look at the big picture and the problem as a whole and understand that eventually everything gets resolved. That at the end of the day, everything does get resolved. No conflict lasts forever. So staying calm in those types of situations allows us to see that, okay, this is going to be okay. Let me listen to what is going on. That now leads into our second point. Second tool, listen to understand. Not just to listen. Listen to understand means when a dispute arises, anger takes over, and that's when we stop listening as a whole. And rather than listening, we'd rather come up with the answer so that we get to this person before they can get to us. So to solve a problem or resolve a dispute, it's important to listen to what the other person is saying, and through that we can see their perspective and possibly see underlying interests. So what are they saying? What is important to what they say? Yeah, and then now we look at, which moves on to focus on the positives. So when we are having a conflict with somebody, focus on the positive of find the commonalities, whether we create them or we find them, find the commonalities. So empathize. So one of the ways we can do this is through empathy. Oh, I'm sorry that you're going through that. I've had a similar situation. That's how we find these commonalities, and we focus on the positives. And through this, we sort of make the anger slow down. So they become calm again, and we can talk normally. Then we have tactfully state your problem or issue. So this will help people understand your issue if you say it in the correct wording. And what I mean by that is people often get triggered by certain words. So for me, I'm a blonde woman. So for me, a trigger thing might be people thinking I'm stupid because I'm blonde, because there's that stereotype. So people, when we're arguing, avoid those types of trigger words. So that's one of the biggest things again. And then attack the problem rather than blaming each other. So we attack the problem rather than the person. When you depersonalize your point of view, so we take away the personal feelings from what we're arguing, you will be heard more clearly. Rather than accusing the person, it is better to create problem-solving sentences. So for example, so we say, let's take a look at why this is happening. So that's one of the sentences that we can use. Okay, this is happening more often than not. Let's look at how we can resolve why this is happening. So that's a problem-solving sentence. It takes away your personal feelings, your personal angers, and that's how we avoid personalizing these issues and making it about emotions. Then we look at avoid blaming each other. So now again, we're taking the personalized matter out of it. So we avoid blaming each other. Assigning blame does not help the situation at all. It never does. It just makes anger more of an issue. And as Berman says, you'll see in the is a psychologist that says that when we get angry, it is usually a defense mechanism. So it's how we put up a wall because we've been hurt or we fear something. So we get this wall up and we become angry. So when we blame each other, that wall automatically just goes up. When we do this and we blame each other, we divert from the problem solving. So we never get a resolve. Okay, and then I hope you enjoyed this webinar. As you'll see in front of you, you'll see there's a feedback document. If you'd like to give some feedback, what to work on, that'd be great stuff. Thank you everybody for joining. Nice to see everybody again. And that is all from me this evening. Thank you very much.